some of the keepsakes have a very specific design, and one example is the memory flowers, where actually there's three states, like you hear them normal hearing, recording in hand, recorder in hand, and actually recording. It's actually three different sounds. And maybe Spencer, you want to talk a bit about that?
These collectibles are some of the most important in sort of like teasing out what the history behind the landscape is. There's a very rough kind of timeline that you sort of start to uncover about the history of what happened in this place, and these flowers are sort of like your only kind of concrete glimpses into little snippets of what happened.
The people here are so weak.
I heard gunshots last night.
That was us. What is that?
Look at the pond, the water.
What is that pattern?
Should we run or something?
Yeah, so this was a big sort of collaborative design between me and Kevin, who is the director of the game, where there were these flowers that feel like they have memories trapped inside of them, and the way that you sort of are able to feel what those memories are or experience what those memories are is by recording them. So there had to be three different versions of how they sounded. One, when you're walking around in the game and you sort of walk by them, there's a version where there's a very abstracted version of the memory, which has done a lot of sort of post-production tricks. Part of the requirements from the design team was that they had to be unintelligible because we weren't able to have closed captioning for them. So it couldn't be something where you could understand what they're saying, because then we'd have to create some sort of system for taking those little snippets and translating each one in real time, and it was just not feasible. So it had to be scrambled enough where you couldn't really understand what they were saying or what they meant. And then there's a layer of this sort of like shimmering kind of drone kind of sound, which is some like FM synthesis kind of like upper particles kind of thing. And then when you pull out your recorder, you lose the sort of drone, and you just sort of hear these little shards shifting around where you can sort of hear that there's something in there. You're not sure what exactly it is, but you hear little chunks of it more intelligibly. And then once you're recording it, you hear the actual memory. Although it's still a little abstracted, there's still a little bit of a vocoder kind of effect on it that's modulated by that drone sound, which is still kind of very faintly present when the voices sort of peek through more.
Please spare the people of this valley. We're so desperate for peace.
And this was kind of a time-consuming process because the game is localized in Japanese and in French, so we kind of had to do these three different layers in triplicate for every single version of the memory flower. So you can sort of hear that there's something there. You're not sure what exactly it is. There's also some VFX that go along with this that you can kind of see.
And I love the progressive disclosure of it. You start from like a wild abstraction, and then
I recognize you.
Yeah?
You're the famous doctor. That's your boy. The one with the visions. I'm right, aren't I? I won't tell nobody.
Yeah, it feels really good with the Tempest audio too. When you're walking around, the way that they sort of catch in the binaural sphere.
yeah, and the full screen visual effects were a great accompaniment. The way that the whole field of view shifted, it all really worked together. And that's another thread that just runs through this whole conversation, is how that collaboration across all the different elements of the experience are working together to communicate and to convey the message of season. So yeah, you can tell that that everyone's working together.
I've always prayed that I need something, but now I just want to thank you. The calm you brought over the world. I'm in love with this silence. This moment.
Absolutely. And as it was said before, more people finding these interactive experiences outside of the traditional game definition, I think, is one of the things that's exciting about the medium, the format, right? It continues to evolve, continues to grow into these diverse areas where people are able to tell their stories, they're able to bring their experiences, share those, and almost create, in the case of some of these moments, an empathy machine for the way that people experience the world. And that is certainly one of the strengths of the artistic mediums, to create these kind of feelings and emotions, and to be in a place where we're talking about games, reaching people in these ways, I think it's a good sign of the medium, despite the layoffs and other job or workplace related challenges that we're facing as part of that growth as well, right?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I feel like in recent times, I've had really more experiences like that, playing games, like being really emotional about things, and yeah, games like Pentiment, which I was talking about earlier, or games like The Last of Us. For me, they really like bring the storytelling in games to a whole new level. And for me, I'm starting really to feel that games are becoming a mature medium to actually tell stories and make you feel emotions, and in a very different way than books do or films do, because in this case you are playing the characters, so you sometimes have to make choices, and you feel things in a very different way than films or books where you're just a spectator, you're not involved directly. But in games you can be involved directly. I feel like recently this power that you have while playing the game has started to really be leveraged into super interesting storytelling experiences. And I'm really happy to see that medium that I love, growing and maturing and being able to really grow into that art form that it is already on many levels. But I feel like on the storytelling level, we have done really some great stuff recently.
There's this really interesting book this guy, Sethan Nguyen, wrote about how the sort of medium for art in games is actual agency itself. Like, agency is what you're working with as your sort of tool, and how that just sort of cracks open a whole other sort of way that you can sort of communicate with people in a way that film or like cinema is not really able to. I don't know. There's, I think, a lot of artistic potential for video games that it's starting to become more deeply explored. Obviously, there's a lot of really interesting experimental games over the history of gaming, but I think there's still a lot more that can be done. And I'm interested to see there's like a lot of like art galleries are starting to work. Like I saw the Serpentine Gallery in London commissioned an artist to make a game, and then it just becomes a whole other funding model of like, an art collector buys the actual object, quote unquote, of the game, and then the game is free to play. Like I saw the game that they released, you can just go and download it on Steam. So I think there's a lot of avenues for expression there that people need to look more into.
Yeah, totally. Agency. I think there's something to that as being at the core of processing the medium differently than you do in a passive way, for instance. And yeah, it's cool. It's cool to be growing up with these things, maturing, as you said, effects.
Who are you? What are you doing here? You've been traveling for a little while then, feeling like a ghost. I feel that way in my own life, my own home.
When the technical pieces can just dissolve into the background and you're left with that emotional resonance of the experience, I think it really shines, and that's a tough thing to accomplish. So, well done on that. Ultimately, it's been such a great showcase of sound. Season is, a masterpiece of those details, right? And I'm sure we're only scratching the surface. Is there a Wilhelm scream buried in there somewhere?
I think so.
No.
We should have, eh?